If you want to reprogram your mind, start programming it. Start programming it, meaning you don't let stuff come into you, you choose what comes into you.
So there's been a lot of talk about reprogramming your mind, and a lot of people on YouTube talking about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think reprogramming your mind, I'm always of the mind that I want to try to take things down from being buzzworthy, right? I don't want things to be like a buzzword. Like I'm big into practicality. I'm big into taking actual steps to make things happen. I'm big into trying to figure out, at least for myself, what made me think the way that I think now. When I was growing up, difficult childhood, trying to figure out what triggers and traumas came out of that, my defense mechanisms, stuff like that. Most people don't realize that reprogramming their mind is nothing more than teaching themselves to say things differently about themselves. And as simple as that statement is, and as profound as that statement could be, essentially most people don't do that. Most people wake up each day with whatever outlook that they have, or whatever perspective that they have, or whatever shift that they have, or they had a massive breakup the night before, or they've had several breakups throughout their life, or they're in a massive debt, they got a crappy financial situation. When it comes down to it, what people are mostly struggling with is understanding why they made the decisions they made and took the actions that they took to begin with. And it wasn't until that I started digging in, I like to call it discovery and exploration. Like I'm a big fan of, in fact, I'll tell you this as an example. I had built my first company I built to a multi-million-dollar status. Top line revenue, probably $10 or $12 million. This is probably 10 years ago. And the company was going great. Like I was in a season of life where I could have the things that I wanted. I could come and go as I wanted. We had a great reputation in the marketplace. Everything was going, amazingly well, except for the fact that I felt like an imposter, right? I felt like, for some reason, I felt like I needed to hide the fact that I was a high school, dropout that had struggled with homelessness and even had a suicide attempt and stuff like that. I felt like I needed to hide that from the world.
Was this like a subconscious thing happening?
It could have been subconscious. It could have been just, it was a combination of conscious and subconscious.
Okay.
So it was conscious in the fact that I was aware of it, and I knew I didn't want anybody to know. And it was subconscious in that I felt like that somehow if I shared that with people or began to tell people about my own story in such a way that they would somehow discount me. And I didn't want to struggle with what I refer to as the 4 needs, which is to be seen, valued, heard, and appreciated, right? I've learned that almost every decision that I've made in my entire life came out of one of those 4 needs: to be seen, to be valued, to be heard, or to be appreciated. And as a result, in that moment, for the life of me, I couldn't understand why I felt empty on the inside, why I felt like an imposter, why I didn't want my own leadership team, because many of the people that were working for me at that time, or working with me, as I like to say, were 4 and 8 year college grads. Some of them had MBAs. They had every letter after their name that was supposed to say they should definitely be ahead of me. And here I was, this high school dropout that was just gritty and tenacious that made something happen, right? Mm-hmm. What I discovered under all that was, as the company was growing, I was going to be the greatest impediment to its lack of growth moving forward, because I was unwilling to admit where I was, how I got there, and more importantly, what needed to change to get me from basically where I was to hopefully where the company was going. And that all started with I went to a seminar. This is November of 2011. I went to a seminar by a well-known thought leader. It was a major seminar. And I kind of proceeded to get my teeth kicked in for the first couple of days of the seminar, because it was like all about leadership and like leaders don't do this and leaders do this. And to be sure, I was doing all the crap that leaders shouldn't be doing, and I wasn't doing any of the stuff that the leaders should have been doing.
Is that how the need for reprogramming manifested itself was your leadership style?
Yeah, so I would say this. I mean, I wouldn't call it manifestation as much as awareness. I've said before, we've got the 7 levels of life mastery, and the first step in that process is always the awakening. Right, you will find that in your course of life, you will have what we refer to as cornerstone moments in your life where things that are never the same, things that they go up or they go down. It takes you towards success or it steals from your success, right? Well, in each of those cornerstone moments, there's this piece of what I call the first stage of life mastery, which is awareness, right? It's being aware that something needs to change, right? Most of us go through life in a state of ignorance, right? We are where we are today because that's all we've allowed ourselves to be. We are where we are today because we haven't learned that there's a need for change. We'd much rather admit, one of the greatest things I see people do all the time is I see them say, well, I know me better than anybody else. Yeah. I got news for you. Everybody else probably knows you better than you know yourself. That's pride, that's ego, and it stands in your way for success. So going back to that seminar, if you will, in that seminar, I understood the need for searching and exploration and discovery. The reason people struggle to reprogram their mind or reprogram their beliefs or reprogram the way in which they see themselves or in the way in which they think on a consistent basis is because they don't go into it with a spirit of exploration and discovery. Instead, they go into it with blame, shame, and condemnation. They well, I see that flaw in me. And what we do is we focus on that flaw. Yeah. Rather than focusing on what we're really good at and what makes us kind of unique and special, because everybody is unique and special in their own way. Inevitably, because we focus on this, we stay locked in that limiting belief cycle, right? And we're aware that we need to be reprogrammed, but we're not going into it with the spirit of exploration. So as a result, we kind of get lost in this ever-growing cycle of this negative outlook, this negative piece, which is where the buzzword comes from. Reprogram your mind. You got to reprogram your mind. You got to reprogram your mind. Now, I want to say one final thing real fast. The greatest question that I ever asked myself, and I want everybody watching to take accountability on this or take the ownership of this. The greatest question I ever asked myself that gave me the greatest awareness of where I was something that was kind of done. I was literally on an elliptical machine. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was raining outside. I was on an elliptical machine. I was sweating to the oldies kind of thing. And the greatest question was this: what does it take to change the essence of a man? Now, what I was saying in that moment was, what does it take to change the essence of Stephen? So what does it take to change the essence of blank, and insert your name? That will lead you on the path to awareness and discovery and ultimately reprogramming your mind. Because if you can't identify the things that are standing in your way, then you can't focus on those things. And if you can't focus on those things, then inevitably you can't work on those things, which means you're not going to be able to counteract this quote-unquote reprogramming of your mind. Instead, you're going to stay in this state of ignorance, and you'll stay stuck simply because you don't know any better. So I wanted to make sure I told everybody that was listening that, because it's pivotal to understanding that the type of questions that you ask determine the type of answers that you get. Yeah. And so much of reprogramming your mind is asking yourself a different question and expecting a different answer.
Well, it sounds like it has a lot to do with how you talk to yourself. And we're going to get into that in just a second, but I want to take you back for a second.
Yeah, sure.
And just so that the viewers can kind of understand, how would somebody know if they need to reprogram their mind for success?
Well, I think the easiest way, and I love that question, by the way, that's a great question. The easiest way to know if you need to reprogram your mind is if you're always getting negative results. I'll say it this way. And I'm going to use my life as a personal example. So I know to do this because I live and teach by my experience, right? I've dissected things that worked, things that didn't work, and I've literally created a framework just for that. We call it Transformative. In my earlier segment, my relationships were not great. Meaning, I was dating girls, for example, like everybody else does. You
earlier in your life?
Yeah, earlier in my life. You know, you date people, and you kind of, and each of those things teach you something about yourself. As I did that, I began to understand that I had later on, this is after I've had several bad relationships, that I had an affinity for attracting toxic relationships. Okay, how does that show itself? What was my symptom, if you will? Kind of like if you have a cold, you go, you're like, oh, my throat's draining, right? There's symptoms in our life that kind of say, hey, there's a bigger problem. My symptom in my life was my relationships would last on average about 6 months. They would start off wonderful, like super passionate, super amazing, and then within 6 months they'd be super toxic, right? Toxicity showed up in the other people cheating and whatnot. This need to try to control, which created a need in me to try to control the relationship, and and it takes you down a negative thing. Okay, so that's like a relationship example.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the things that I struggled with most in my life was toxic relationships.
And it could be in any area, though.
And it can be in any area, right? So what I would say is, in my mind, I would think to things of like, well, I need to know where they're at so I know that we're good, right? I need them to tell me, if I say I love you, if they don't say I love you back, in that moment, I'm like, well, something must be wrong. I guess this thing's about to go to hell in a handbasket. We better, like, you know what I'm saying?
So these are negative belief systems.
These are negative beliefs and thoughts and all that kind of stuff. Now, take that back to the financial side of things. Now, I've said this publicly, and I think it's in my new book, that one of the things that, and I love my dad, by the way. My dad's amazing. He's grown a lot. He's come a long way. But one of the things that he said early on that really stuck with me, I was probably maybe 7 or 8 years old. He had us for a weekend or something like that. And I just remember him saying this to either somebody else. I don't know if he said it directly to me, but I remember hearing it directly from him. And it was that Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by. Now, when I did the research for my next book, one of the things that I discovered was in the 1600s, the Scoggins came from Europe, like England specifically. And they did so as part of a penal colony. Okay, so you're like, okay, well, penal colony, they must have been criminals. Until you understand that the reason that they came here to begin with was because they actually killed a deer in order to eat on a lord's land, which got them arrested, which then got them sent here as an indentured servant.
Oh, wow.
So basically, the Scoggins came to the Americas as indentured servants.
And they were already struggling.
They were already struggling, so they became sharecroppers and stuff like that. And as they worked their way through that, we began to understand that all the way until me, there was this financial struggle. There was this financial belief of how you handle money. There was this innate belief that Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by.
Behind everything.
Behind everything, right?
So that poisoned the well.
Exactly. So it poisons the well. So I say that because one of the things that I think people don't do is, they don't take the time to connect the dots. They'd rather focus on what they don't have now than understand why they don't have it in the first place. Like to really super dig deep and understand, hey, look, maybe there's an underlying belief. Maybe it's a belief I was taught. Maybe it's a belief that was spoken over me that I chose to believe. Maybe it's because, hey, look, someone crushed my heart in a massive breakup and I thought I was so in love. I thought they were the one. And then when they crushed my heart, all of a sudden I say, well, I must not be lovable. I must not be worthy. Those are the kind of things that we tell ourselves that really hold ourselves back. Now, if you use the financial example that I began to talk about, how that showed up in my life was I mimicked the behaviors of the people before me, which means I was just spending money. I was borrowing money. I was spending money. If I borrowed money from a friend or a family member or whoever, let's say I went to you and said, hey man, can I have $20? Man, I really need gas. Like I don't have any gas. And let's say you hand me $20, right? I would take that money and maybe I would put $10 in the gas tank and I'd probably spend the rest of it. And then like a couple weeks later, you'd be like, hey man, dude, I give you that $20, man. You said you're gonna hit me back when you got paid. Did you get the money? Mm-hmm. Did you get paid? Yeah, man, I got paid, man. But my boss shorted me and I just, and next thing you know, I don't want to even talk to you because I know I owe you. And you know I owe you. And now that relationship is like toxic or begins to be toxic or at least difficult. And on top of that, my financial money management shows up in an empty checkbook, but yet I still got bills coming in, right? People don't take the time to connect the dots. In order to properly reprogram your mind, you have to be able to sit in the stuff for a minute. You have to be able to sit with a pen and a pad, asking yourself what needs to change, what does it take to change the essence of who I am, what shapes my beliefs as it relates to finances, what shapes my beliefs as it relates to relationship, what shapes my beliefs as it relates to faith.
So the key is in going backwards first before you can move forward.
Yes. That's my personal thing. I personally don't think you can correctly reprogram your mind in the moment, like in that moment, and just move forward. I think you need to understand how those, what we call origin beliefs, which is what we refer to as the origin story, are formed in the first place, right? We got to understand how this even came up. You see what I'm saying? And the next thing that we struggle with in reprogramming our mind as a whole is this essence of distractions.
was going to say, why do you think it's so difficult for people to not do that work of going backwards? Because you said a lot of people don't do that.
Well, I think a lot of people do it because they do it as themselves, as the character. So they lived it the first time, and let's say living it was painful the first time. So for them to go backwards and look at it again, rather than being the editor or on the film room floor of watching that movie kind of play out before, they go back into the character role. So they have to relive it.
So you're saying when you're diving into your past, you need to look at it as if you're a third
stepping
party
out
watching.
of it. You're stepping out of it.
So that you're not emotional about it?
It's so you have better clarity. All right, imagine this, okay? I'll use Luke Skywalker as an example. He's, most people know what Star Wars is. Maybe some people have watched it, maybe some people haven't, whatever. All right, but he's a character in a story. He's got a hero, he has a journey, he's got a conflict he's got to solve, he's got villains he has to face, there's a growth curve he has to go through. Also, he can become the Jedi, okay? The reason hero stories resonates with humanity so much, no matter who the hero is, for some people it might be She-Ra, for some people it might be SpongeBob SquarePants. It doesn't matter, right? But whatever that hero is to that person, the reason it resonates is because it's a resonation of life. We all start off in a specific place. We all have to face specific things. Those things then force us to grow or mature or decline. Then we have to take on a new ownership, a new learning, and then continue to move forward. I say that to say that most people, again, they put in their mind, like, I never want to have to go through that again. I have been through things in my life that I hope I never have to go through again. Like, as an actor, as a person, as the character, as the person in the moment. Okay? The trick is learning to be able to disassociate, which is a neurolinguistic term, of stepping outside of your life. One of the tools that we use is a map. We'll take all the cornerstone moments in your life and we'll break them down and we'll map them out in trajectory so it's on a wall. It forces you to disassociate. It forces you to step back. Rather than me just having a conversation with you or Brian or any of the other team members and saying, hey man, how was your life? And you're just telling me the story, because as you're telling me the story, you're reliving it. When you actually put it up on a wall, a lot of things can become clearer, especially when you learn to filter it in such a way, like you're filtering it in, how did I feel in that moment? What are the chances of the type of thought pattern, a belief pattern that may have been created? How did that jeopardize how I was seen, heard, valued, appreciated? How did that jeopardize or intensify my overall sense of safety, my overall sense of being? You have to understand the underlying thought patterns that drive the ultimate behavior, okay? That window of understanding the underlying thought patterns and how it drives behavior is the essence of reprogramming your mind. It is step number one. Step number one, after you identify what those things are, is to go to, or step number two is to go through it and say, okay, what do I need to keep and amplify, and what do I need to remove and replace?
When you see amplify, what do you mean? Like these are positive things?
Yeah, these are positive things. Look, here's the deal. You can have a terrible experience, and if you learn to position it properly, it can become a positive training resource. All right, I went through homelessness. All right, it taught me the evidence of remaining in this humble, confident space of understanding that I was not how much money I made. I was not whether or not I was going to build a business or the entrepreneur. In other words, it taught me a lot about my identity, and it taught me a lot about pride and ego, right? People that make a bunch of money and then lose a bunch of money, you'll always know. My good friend David Meltzer, for example, made a ton of money, lost a ton of money, and now he's making a ton of money again, but now his heart's completely different. It's completely different. It's all about service. It's all about impact. It's all about helping other people, right? Before, it was all about I. What can I get? What can I buy? What can I have? What can I showboat, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people go through that phase that become highly successful entrepreneurs that have a heart for impact. I'm a big believer that if you'll do the impact, the income follows, right? That's one example of where you have an attribute that you can amplify, right? What it needed to be amplified in that moment, in that with him specifically was, yes, I have natural born talent to be an entrepreneur, build businesses, be relatable to people, all that kind of stuff, but how I position it matters. What took his legs out from under him and myself and other people like us in the moment, the first time around, was pride and ego and arrogance, right? When you remove pride and ego and arrogance, then your perspective is greater, which means you see more blind spots and you see things coming your way that can take your legs out from under you again. Right? I'm a big believer that humility is the ultimate source of making things better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I just want to wrap it up real quick here with, you mentioned something about distractions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people talking about like social media detox, talking about how negative the news can be on, your thinking patterns. What are some of the things that you think people should avoid or stay away from that could maybe poison that well a little bit and make it harder to reprogram their mind?
Yeah, so there's really two aspects to detox of any kind. Call it TV, call it social media, call it whatever. So first of all, you need to understand that the amount of time that you spend in media sources specifically also goes into your mind through your eyes and your ears. So the type of media you're consuming, you will end up feeling, right? So if you're watching a lot of negative movies, a lot of stuff like that, a lot of negative social media, and you're getting fed all that kind of stuff, you will start to begin to feel negative in nature. Rather than if you're doing the opposite of watching things or listening to things that are uplifting in nature, you'll also feel that as well. One of the things that I see with people who struggle with anxiety and depression, a lot of them are consuming negative music, negative TV, negative social media, all that kind of stuff. The news, all of that. And we have to understand that in today's environment, there's a documentary that Netflix did called The Social Dilemma. It's a quasi-documentary. It's quasi-documentary was what it is. They kind of take a life of a young man who's manipulated over time, because the way the social media algorithms work is they show you the content that you essentially say you want to see, right? And their job is to drive up engagement and to keep you engaged as long as possible, okay? What that does is that obviously keeps you engaged. It also keeps you feeding the content. So you may have a bad day and you look at a negative thing. Well, you look at that negative thing, now you're going to get 3 more pieces of negative.
Right.
So it takes you, it's kind of like Alice going down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. So that's one aspect. The next aspect is it is an ultimate distraction. Here's what I mean by that. Most people who come in contact with us, when we start to lay out their daily routine, we discover one very, very common theme that happens across the board through a lot of folks. And that is they are so distracted on a given day, it's almost impossible for them to make progress, because their productive time is very limited. Here's what I mean by that. The average person is awake roughly 15 hours a day, 15 to 15 and a half hours, okay? Of that 15 and a half hours, the average person is spending about 5 hours in work and the balance of time in distractions. Social media, TV, media, all that kind of stuff.
Like the rest of it?
The rest of it, yeah. It's crazy how much distraction. One of the things that we talk about a lot is this importance of setting routines, right? Putting a routine in place, which allows you to actually take in some of that information, but also kind of like put it in its proper place.
So you're eliminating the distractions too.
Exactly, because people who are ultimately being distracted or we're being wrapped up in distractions on a consistent basis, they are not going to be anywhere as productive as they can. The best person I know to kind of give a living illustration of this right now that I've been working with hardcore is my kid, my own son. Okay. During high school, we would go through this weird thing with both of my boys during high school, was where, they would have their video games and all that kind of stuff, and their grades would go, right?
Like when they would play video games?
Yeah, when they, and then we would take their stuff away from them, it was like a punishment kind of thing, and then they're right back up, okay? Now they both graduated high school, now they're both in college, right? Now both of them, one of them has a part-time job while he's going to college.
Right.
And as a result, I saw this missing deadlines thing at the job, which is obviously not going to help him long term. I then also saw this thing where all of a sudden now he's like not necessarily hitting his schoolwork like he's supposed to be. So then I pulled his stuff again. And he got upset for about 10 minutes, and then, 10 minutes was longer than that. But, a week later, we're in the mountains, and we're driving down the mountains. He's like, look, I'm actually kind of glad you did that. I was getting off track. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's called distractions. It's not the video game itself that's bugging me. It's the fact that it's taking you away from being productive. Right? You see what I'm saying? And we all face that to some degree, right? It's nothing for me to have a really long week or whatever, and then to sit and watch 3 hours of The Blacklist with my wife kind of deal on that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like it's there. But if I intentionally schedule time to have entertainment factor, which is okay, right? Then I have productive time. The problem is most people have it reversed. It's more entertainment value or what's conceived to entertainment value, media sources, stuff like that, rather than productive time, right? Highly successful people that break through limiting barriers or limiting beliefs, people that get stuff done, they are highly routine driven, and in that routine there's a large amount of time of productive time, right? So it's not just the messaging that you're taking in that controls your emotions, and which can raise your cortisol and also bring your serotonin down, right? Because the type of messages you're receiving that you're choosing to believe, right, has a direct impact on how you think and how you feel. There's also the distractionary factor.
Right, because I mean, if people are spending the majority of their time in distraction, I can only imagine, like, it's like you said, if their time that's being spent in distraction is spiking their cortisol and doing all kinds of negative stuff because they're consuming negative stuff, social media, news, whatever, if that's happening more than the productive time where they can actually do what you said in the beginning of this video, go into their past, take the positive actions to actually reframe and repicture things so that they can change their thinking patterns, they're just going to stay stuck, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, here's the deal. Too much of anything is not good for you, right? You can have a glass of wine, at least, you know, this is me talking. You know, I can have a glass of wine every now and again with my wife, and it's a social thing. I don't get like drunk and go off the deep end or nothing like that, right? Or you can have a lot of alcohol in general, no matter what drink it is, and all of a sudden you can lose your mind. You wake up and you're vomiting everywhere and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, I'll never do it again, and the next week you're doing it again. Right? That's just foolishness, right? That's an overindulgence. It's the same thing with media, the same thing with sex, the same thing with food, the same thing with occupation, right? You can be so self-absorbed in your family that you're unable to provide for your family. But you can also be so self-absorbed in your profession that you completely alienate your family. The easiest way to get your mind in check is to do what we talked about first. Step one, go backwards, figure out what needs to be removed, what needs to be amplified. Step two is kind of start putting those things in place. And step three, start eliminating these distractions and start putting a routine in place that helps you balance out your life so you can have entertainment value, but you can also have productive value, and then you can have nurturing value, which is what I refer to as introspection. One of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of social media, and I do my best not to engage, like I talk to our audience, I'm active on Instagram and I'm active on Facebook for the most part currently, but I try to do that at specific times of the day is because I don't want to get lost in it, right? Why? Because part of what I'm doing requires me to be consistently introspective. I'm constantly having to ask myself, okay, how did I get to where I'm at? Okay, where did I start? What steps did I take? How did I get there? So I can continue to make content that allows people to follow a step-by-step approach to breaking free and breaking through, right? Imagine if I wanted to do all this, but then I spent half my day playing video games or half my day watching movies or half my day in social media. How effective would I be at helping other people?
At least half. I mean, right? Because
exactly.
One of the things that I've noticed about you and I admire about you a lot is you are the epitome of an action taker. I mean, seriously, you're very, very focused. I noticed that more so than anyone else I've really, I think, ever seen in my entire life. When you show up to work, it's work time. And you don't let yourself, I've never seen you watch a YouTube video at work, unless it was for like a tutorial.
Preparing for an interview or something.
Specifically for a work use. So like that focus, I think, is a large part of why you have been able to overcome what you have and become so successful. And I think that it's just so undervalued by people because distraction is addicting.
Well, look, here's the deal. Most people judge people of influence, people that have quote unquote achieved their level of success. Almost everybody judges them by what they see because those people, including myself, are showing them, right? You know, I intentionally do not show cars and houses and stuff. Right, because I don't want people to be attracted to us for cars and houses and stuff.
Not just on the internet, you're like that in person too.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I worked hard. Like I don't need to prove my identity or my worth to anybody. I don't need to. My work speaks for itself.
Right.
And the best thing that I can give a person is not my stuff or resources. The best thing I can give them is the education of how I got here. Right? That's how I scale. That's how I scale my life and create a legacy that outlives me. But in this entire distraction and reprogramming your mindset kind of deal, you've got to understand that at the end of the day, it's focus, diligence, and effort. Focus, diligence, and effort. Focus, diligence, and effort, right? At work, it's work time because I have made a routine. I'm trying to segment my life to be productive in each of these areas, right? Because I know that when I'm not productive or I overindulge in any of those areas, it causes pain. I'm all about creating progress. Focus, right, is at the early onset of that. And if I'm focusing on distractions, I'm focusing on social media, I'm focusing on the news media or whatever, I'm always going to be led astray. The days of what I refer to, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, too bad, the days of having a media source being 100% totally reliable, I believe is long gone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it doesn't matter what you believe or what sources you're watching or whatever. I mean, in general, across the board. There's always something that somebody else is trying to sell you at this stage in the game. And maybe one day we'll get back to what I recall used to refer to as like, normal informational sources, I guess. The word I'm looking for is escaping me at the moment. But essentially, maybe we'll get back there. But right now, I'm not going to invest half my time in media, consuming media.
Whether it be social media or the news.
Exactly. Instead, rather than becoming a consumer, I'm becoming a producer. I'm producing media that I hope adds value to people to offset the media that doesn't add value.
Is that one of the biggest things that you think that people could do in order to improve their mood? Like, if you could pick one daily action that people can take, just to start small, that'll help them reprogram their mood on a daily basis. They feel constantly overwhelmed or anxious. What would you prescribe for them?
Oh, it's very simple. And I learned this the hard way. So, quick story. I went to the gym. This has been years ago. And I was good friends with this guy that he was cock diesel. I mean, like, the dude literally could have done the muscle.
Jacked.
Yeah, he was jacked. He could totally have done the muscle building, like, magazine kind of deal. And outside of the gym, the dude was, like, super friendly, super, like, hey, how you doing, man? How's your mom and them? Like total Will Smith personality style, right? Big smile, big chill,
Okay, cool.
Like you wanted to hang with the guy.
Yeah.
Right? Well, he would come into the gym, and I'd be working. I was a personal trainer at the time, so he would come into the gym, and I'd be making shakes for other people or whatever in between sessions, and we would shoot the breeze for a few minutes and kind of hang out, almost like what I mentioned before, like you're out of the gym. Well, he would then put his big headphones on, these big monster headphones, and he would, within about 10 minutes, he went from. And you would see him, he would literally walk around. I wish I could get up and walk around right now, because he would literally get up and walk around and go, like he would picking weights up and throwing them down.
His entire attitude would
his entire attitude changed simply by what he was listening to.
Wow.
Simply by what he was listening to. Our good friend Casey Curating that we had an interview on. In fact, if you guys haven't checked that out, make sure you research Casey Curating. Talks about the frequencies. There are actual frequencies that impact the brain that either will create, that change your emotions, make you more awake, more comprehensive, more comprehensible, or you can be able to comprehend more, what they call focus. There's stuff that makes you sleepy. And those that understand media understand how to apply that. So here's what I say by that. Most people don't believe that the subconscious influences is a big deal. But if I said, give me a break, break me off a piece of that
Kit Kat bar.
See, that just goes to show that influence matters, right? You have someone sing the first half of that song, they're like, I feel like Kit Kat bar. They feel like they have to say Kit Kat bar, otherwise, you see what I'm saying? So I say all that to say that if you find yourself in a depressive or anxious state, then you've got to change what's going in through your eyes and what's going in through your ears. I have no bones about when I'm having a very stressful day, or if I'm, when some of the seasons that I've been through with some of the embezzlement stuff that I've been through, some of the homelessness that I've been through, all that stuff. One of my main go-to right now is I'll go to YouTube, and I got a specific piano track that I will just play, and it soothes the soul. It'll bring me down. It brings me to chill. It brings me to peace, right? I don't go and watch or go and listen to some of my hip hop R&B that's like, that's not what I'm.
It doesn't get you in the state that you're
exactly.
looking for.
Now at the same time, even in the gym, there will be days like on the weekends where when I'm in the gym, I'll use more music than I will like learning stuff. Because during the week, I'm listening to podcasts, YouTube, and stuff like that for learning audiobooks, etc. Well, on the weekends, I'm listening to music. But even then, I might have something with a really boof, 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 like a solid beat, or like kind of crazy like upbeat guitar riff. But I'm not listening to death metal. I'm not listening to gangster rap. Now I used to listen to all that stuff, right? I'm listening to Skillet. I'm listening to the lyrics itself matter.
Really?
The lyrics that you listen to itself matter. I might listen to NF, who's like a cross between like Eminem and the Christian world. Like he's starting to lean a little more towards Eminem, but you see what I'm saying? Like I'll listen to stuff like that from time to time, in the gym, because I want to be cognizant about what's going in through my eyes and my ears.
So you're saying that like whatever you listen to, whatever you watch, whatever you eyes and ears, like you said, is literally influencing you at a greater level than anything else? I mean, it sounds like...
To me, it's between your parental influences growing up.
Okay.
When I say parental, the people that played the role of your parents, it doesn't necessarily have to be your biological parents. That role specifically, your environment, your environmental role, and then your subconscious ones I think are the most powerful in influencing who you are, how you think, and what you think about.
Yeah, and it sounds like the ones that you have the most control of. I mean, you can't control who your parents were. You can,
which is why we do the focus technique, which is why we go backwards to go forwards.
You can technically control your environment, but it's kind of a pain sometimes to like, you're not going to uproot your entire life.
Well, you can't control the environment necessarily that you grew up in, but you can now set the stage for the environment you want to grow, that you want to grow in.
But what I'm getting at is it makes sense that the subconscious stuff, like what you're listening to, what music, what audiobooks, whatever, is the easiest place for someone to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is if you want to feel differently immediately, you need to listen to something different immediately, right? You need to get to a place where you are choosing your influences. See, most people just will turn on a channel or play a specific rapper or play a specific rock guy or country guy or whatever, not realizing that their desire for girls or their desire for money or their desire for things and stuff is greatly influenced by the very thing that they're watching. Here, a final point on this real fast, because this is super powerful when it comes to reprogramming your mind, is understanding what influences your mind. Okay? If you want to reprogram your mind, start programming it. Start programming it, meaning you don't let stuff come into you, you choose what comes into you. There's choice there, okay? Consider this. In the 1930s and 40s, what types of swimsuits were men and women wearing?
Gosh, I don't know. That was way before my time.
Okay. Right, well, they were super high cut, like you were little to no revealing. Okay. 1970s roll around, make love, not war.
It becomes a lot more revealing?
It begins to become a lot more revealing. Fast forward to 2020, 2021, right?
We got these little...
it's not even that. Most TV stations, now show openly people having intercourse.
Yeah.
Right? That stuff when I was 13 and 12 was considered porn.
Yeah.
Okay? There's I'm not going to name the different networks, but there has been a concerted effort over time to control what we see, which controls how we act and what we want. Well, if you understand what controls people, how people think, how that impacts them to take action, how that controls what they want, then you can sell them anything.
Yeah. So it all starts with these influences.
It all starts with these influences. It's important to understand that you have complete accountability in your life. Okay? I have complete accountability in my life. I can choose at any given moment about what I choose to listen to and or watch. And you cannot take for granted that what you choose to listen to or watch, and it doesn't matter if it's social media, news media, TV, streaming apps, whatever. You need to understand that you are choosing to watch stuff that you might have a perceived entertainment value, thinking, well, it's not that big a deal.
I think that's what most people are saying.
It's not that big.
Most people are like, the music I listen, even I'm guilty of it because you've told me that before, and I still listen to the same stuff. And so, like, I know it's one of the things
on tape.
I know it's one of the things I've been stubborn about. I got to start listening to you more on, but like, Yeah, like I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
Of hearing you say like, oh, well, don't listen to that music because that kind of music will get you in a bad mood. And I'm like, oh, it won't really make that big of a difference.
And what happens?
But I've actually noticed sometimes, and it makes it worse if you're already in a bad mood and then you listen to a sad song or something, because then it can just spiral.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a real thing, for sure.
Oh, it's a real thing, and there's been scientific evidence about certain gigahertz and things of that nature that influence certain moods.
Frequencies.
I can tell you, yeah, frequencies. Some of the there has been torture systems developed based on sound.
Dang.
They'll literally put somebody in a tub of some kind and fill it with water, and then put certain frequencies in it and mix and match them, and it creates physical pain. Physical and emotional and spiritual pain all at the same time, based on sound.
Dang.
All sound is a resonated frequency, right? And you can research sound frequencies, and there's like a whole gamut of sound frequencies.
Yeah.
Right? That's why certain things that you listen to will pump you up, certain things that you listen to will make you tired, certain things like, what was it, Bob Ross, right? Let's make some happy trees. I used to love watching that dude. Like, I would watch him, but then I would find myself like,
wanting to fall asleep.
Yeah, falling asleep and having some, dreaming about happy trees. You know what I'm saying? So, look, it's a real deal. What I want people to understand is what goes in through their eyes and their ears controls how they think, or it doesn't necessarily control, but it definitely influences it. If it influences you, it influences your behaviors, your thoughts, and your actions, which means you need to look at it hardcore if you are in fact going to reprogram your mind. The second thing is that people need to understand is what made them who they are today has both strengths, struggles, and blind spots in it, and without assessing that, you will be unable to reprogram your mind.
Sounds great, man. Where can people ask us questions if they want to?
Yeah, dude. You know what? We actually did this specific channel or this specific show, if you will, to answer these questions that are coming in from you guys in the audience, which is super important to me and super important to us. I only want to do content that hopefully matters to your heart, your mind, and your soul to get you kind of where you are to be, from where you are today to where you want to be at. As a result, all you got to do is drop your questions and comments in the comment line below on the video in the description. Actually, no, the description is going to have a link or two in it that Connor will probably throw in there.
Yeah, just leave your comments below the video if you have any questions, and we'll catalog all of them and make sure that we put them in a future show.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, check out this one right here. I know you're going to love it. So the number one question I think people need to ask themselves is what could be? What could be my end result if I dared to try?